In 2004, Blockbuster operated more than 9,000 stores worldwide and generated over $5 billion in annual revenue. In the United States, it was the primary way households rented movies. Its blue and yellow storefronts were embedded in suburban shopping centers, its logo printed on membership cards carried in wallets, its late fees discussed often enough to become part of popular culture. The company employed tens of thousands of people and maintained direct relationships with nearly every major film studio. Within a decade, most of those stores were gone. By 2014, the brand existed only as a licensed name, its original business effectively extinguished. Blockbuster's position at the start of the 2000s appeared stable. Home video rental was a mature industry, but not one that seemed immediately threatened. DVDs had replaced VHS tapes, reducing inventory costs and improving margins. Studios depended on rental chains to monetize films after theatrical release. Consumers were accustomed to driving to a store, browsing shelves, and returning titles a few days later. Blockbuster's scale allowed it to negotiate favorable terms with suppliers, dictate release windows, and operate a standardized retail model across thousands of locations. Its dominance was not accidental. It was the result of disciplined expansion, operational consistency, and a business model that had proven resilient through earlier technological shifts. The core of that model was straightforward. Blockbuster leased retail space in high-traffic areas, stocked physical copies of movies and games, and rented them to customers for a fixed period. Late fees, while unpopular, represented a significant portion of revenue. Inventory decisions were centralized. Stores were optimized for volume rather than curation. The company invested heavily in brand recognition and convenience, positioning itself as the default option rather than a specialty retailer. For most of the 1990s, this approach worked. Smaller competitors struggled to match its purchasing power or marketing reach. Independent video stores steadily disappeared. By the late 1990s, however, subtle changes were already underway. DVDs made it easier to ship movies by mail. Broadband internet was expanding, though unevenly. Personal computers were becoming common household devices. None of these developments on their own directly threatened Blockbuster's stores, but together, they began to alter how media could be distributed. In 1997, a small company called Netflix was founded with a mail-order DVD rental model. At first, it attracted little attention. Its customer base was limited, its logistics unproven, and its losses persistent. To an established retailer with thousands of physical locations, it did not appear urgent. Blockbuster's leadership was aware of Netflix, but saw it as a niche service. The idea that customers would wait days for a movie to arrive by mail seemed incompatible with the spontaneous nature of home entertainment. Moreover, Blockbuster's stores were already built and staffed. Their fixed costs were sunk. Any alternative model would need to outperform an existing network that reached most American households within a short drive. From inside the organization, the competitive threat looked theoretical rather than immediate. As the early 2000s progressed, consumer behavior began to shift incrementally. DVD players became standard. Internet usage increased. Netflix refined its subscription model, allowing customers to rent multiple discs without late fees, returning them at their own pace. The appeal was not speed, but predictability and convenience. At the same time, Blockbuster faced internal pressures. Its retail footprint required continuous capital. Store leases, staffing, and inventory replenishment created ongoing obligations. Revenue growth slowed as the market matured. The company was profitable, but increasingly dependent on operational efficiency rather than expansion. Blockbuster did experiment with alternatives. It launched an online rental service and explored hybrid models that combined mail delivery with in-store returns. These initiatives were not ignored or dismissed. They were constrained. Integrating an online subscription business with a store-based operation created conflicts. Late fees, a major revenue source, were incompatible with subscription pricing. Encouraging mail rentals risked reducing store traffic, undermining the economics of existing locations. Each strategic move had implications beyond the immediate competitive response. Ownership structure further complicated decision-making. In 2004, Blockbuster was spun off from Viacom, becoming an independent public company. The separation left it with significant debt and a mandate to deliver consistent quarterly performance. Investments that might depress short-term earnings became harder to justify. Closing stores or radically altering the business model would have required acknowledging that the existing asset base was becoming less valuable. That acknowledgement carried financial and reputational costs. Meanwhile, Netflix continued to grow. Its subscriber base expanded steadily, supported by improvements in logistics and recommendation algorithms that increased customer retention. The company did not rely on physical storefronts, allowing it to scale without comparable overhead. Its losses narrowed as volume increased. By the mid-2000s, it was no longer easily dismissed. The threat was still gradual, but its trajectory was clear. Blockbuster responded with a series of strategic adjustments. It eliminated late fees, reframing them as extended rental charges. The change was intended to address customer dissatisfaction and align more closely with subscription models. It also reduced a key revenue stream. Store-level economics weakened. To offset the impact, the company sought to increase sales of used DVDs and merchandise. It continued to invest in its online platform, but without abandoning the store network that defined its identity. These decisions were not irrational. They reflected an attempt to adapt without dismantling the existing organization. Store closures were implemented selectively, focusing on underperforming locations. The company explored partnerships and considered acquisitions. Each step was measured, constrained by debt obligations and the need to maintain scale. The alternative, rapid contraction or wholesale reinvention, risked destabilizing the entire enterprise. As digital distribution emerged, the competitive landscape shifted again. Video-on-demand services began to appear, first through cable providers, then through internet-based platforms. Streaming technology was initially limited by bandwidth and device compatibility, but its potential was evident. Netflix pivoted towards streaming earlier, leveraging its growing subscriber base to negotiate licensing deals. Blockbuster entered the space later, offering streaming options tied to its existing services. By then, it was reacting rather than setting direction. Financial pressure increased. Revenue declined as store traffic fell. Lease obligations limited flexibility. Creditors monitored performance closely. Efforts to sell the company or find strategic partners failed to produce viable outcomes. Each year, fewer customers visited stores, while competitors without physical infrastructure continued to expand. The cost structure that once supported dominance became a liability. By 2010, Blockbuster filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The filing listed nearly $1 billion in debt. The company announced plans to close hundreds of stores and restructure operations. For many communities, the closures marked the end of a familiar retail presence. Employees were laid off, inventories liquidated, leases terminated. The process was orderly, procedural, and largely expected by that point. An acquisition by Dish Network followed, preserving the brand name but not the original business. A small number of stores continued to operate for a time, primarily as licensed locations. Eventually, even those disappeared, with one exception that became a cultural artifact rather than a commercial force. The infrastructure that once delivered movies to millions of homes no longer existed at scale. Blockbuster's collapse was not the result of a single decision or moment. It was the cumulative effect of structural commitments made during a period when physical distribution was dominant. The company optimized for efficiency within that framework, reinforcing systems that worked well until they no longer aligned with consumer behavior. Its responses to change were constrained by assets, incentives, and timing. Each adjustment addressed an immediate problem while leaving the underlying trajectory intact. For decades, Blockbuster had been more than a retailer. It was an intermediary between studios and households, a standardized interface for entertainment consumption. Families planned weekends around its aisles. New releases were events measured by availability on its shelves. That role depended on assumptions about access, convenience, and scarcity that gradually eroded. When those assumptions changed, the institution built upon them struggled to adapt. The disappearance of Blockbuster did not leave a vacuum for long. Digital platforms replaced physical ones. The act of renting a movie became invisible, embedded in subscriptions and interfaces. What was lost was not only a company, but a particular way of interacting with media. The systems that supported it endured longer than the conditions that made them necessary. When they finally gave way, they did so quietly, through filings, closures, and the gradual fading of a brand that once defined an industry.